Hello, I'm Brian Freiberger, editor for the Leelanau Enterprise. Thank you for checking us out today. Today, my guest is Kyle Blomquist, who is running for Michigan's first congressional district as a Democrat. Blomquist is squaring off against Wayne Stiles and Kelly Barr. The primary will occur on August 4th, and the general election will occur on November 3rd. Incumbents Jack Bergman and candidates Justin Michael and Matthew Donader are racing on the Republican side. Zubin Featherly is racing on the independent ticket. I plan on interviewing all candidates, so please follow along to these episodes and make sure to like and subscribe and find us on social media at leelanaunews.com. All right, Kyle. Well, we're here. We're in a race. It's about the end of July here. I guess just first and foremost, I just want to give you a few minutes just to introduce yourself, where you're from, where you come from, just to kind of introduce you to my audience out here in Leelanau County.
Sure. My name is Kyle Blomquist. I was born and raised in the Upper Peninsula. I live in Iron Mountain, Michigan, which is my hometown. I've been on Iron Mountain City Council for 11 years now, and about 5 or 6 of those have been spent as mayor pro tem. I am an architect by trade. I operate a small practice with my wife, Megan, in downtown Iron Mountain. And I have two beautiful, rambunctious boys that just turned 8 years old. And that's most of the personal biographical information. The reason why I'm kind of deciding to run this race is because I've watched as the material conditions of my neighbors in the American working class here in northern Michigan have deteriorated most of my life. Our conditions are continually getting worse, whether that be our health care or our housing affordability, our wage stagnation, or our ability to retire. I'm seeing so much of that promise undermined, and I want to be able to supplement that through the force of the federal government.
Yeah, yeah. And are you from you live in Iron Mountain? That's where you're currently based out of, right? Are you from out there? I know you've been around for a while. Are you from there, or kind of explain that?
Yes, yes. I was born and raised in Iron Mountain, so I returned to my hometown in 2012.
Yeah, cool. Okay, back in Iron Mountain. I haven't been out there in quite some time. I need to get back up there. So myself, but so what makes you different from Kelly Barr and Wayne Stiles?
I think our platform, I'm really proud of the platform that we put together. I believe that healthcare should be a guarantee in this country. I think it should be treated as a human right. So while others might want ACA expansion or a public option, whether that be softer or strong, I believe that we need Medicare for all. I believe that we need to be able to cover every single American from birth to death, free at the point of service, without any risk of claim denial, care avoidance, or medical debt. I know what it's like to have a private health insurance policy that never suits your needs, that doesn't provide you care when you need it, that you causes you to avoid care because of the cost. And I want to make sure that we remove that reality from so many Americans and make sure that nobody has to stay in a job that they don't like because they're relying on it for their health care. I also, I'm an architect and I see so much of what's failing in our housing policy. And I believe that we should be decommodifying our housing. I believe that we should be banning private equity corporations from buying up single family residences and pricing us out of our own communities as a result. I believe that we need to be able to curb the use of so many of our single family housing stock as Airbnbs, basically expensive vacation properties when there's people within that community that work in that community that can't afford to live there. And I believe that we need to reevaluate our national housing policy to include quality, affordable public housing again, that we should be repealing the Fair Cloth Amendment so we can do that. I also, I'm different from everybody else in this race because I'm willing and able to say that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, that it always was a genocide, and that we should be enforcing existing US law, the Leahy laws, and others to remove our stain of complicity by revoking our funding to the nation of Israel. And I go further and say that I believe that we should have sanctions on the nation of Israel at a time when they are not only perpetrating a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, but having illegal pogroms and annexations in the West Bank, and now the invasions of Lebanon.
Yeah, and just to kind of go on that point, we've we haven't had a Congress vote on a war since World War II. Do you believe that Congress should vote to go into any war or any excursion? And do you support cutting, necessarily foreign financial aid to Israel among other countries, or is it just Israel at this moment?
So to get to your first question about what war powers should mean is I think it's disgraceful that we have, for a long time in this country have almost accepted war as our default position, is whether we're going to call it a police action or whatever term that we want to be able to uh, call war a different name and declare war through the actions of a president that goes rogue and deploys the forces of the US military to start to entangle us in a conflict. And then the role of Congress is then seen as something that's after the fact to be able to rein that in. And even our war powers process, even when we pass war powers resolution, there is a timeline that starts. And so it's not nothing immediate. It's not saving lives at the rate that it needs to save lives. Now, when it comes to our foreign entanglements, I think of Ukraine, for instance. I believe that what we are seeing in Ukraine is we are seeing an illegal action from the Russian government against the Ukrainian people. I believe that we should be able to fund that operation within certain limitations. My concern is always whether we open up forever fronts of war, especially given how we finance so many of our elections. Our current representative, Jack Bergman, takes a lot of money from Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, any number of these defense contractors and weapons manufacturers. And so there's a feedback loop that I believe incentivizes us to be in forever conflict. So it's not that I wholeheartedly or that I unilaterally and exclusively and universally want to revoke all U.S. funding to foreign nations or foreign conflicts, but we need to be judicious about the way that we're doing that. When it comes to Israel, that is something that we should have absolutely no part in. We should have absolutely no part of in a right-wing government's ability to kind of perpetrate violence against their neighbors, and especially now that it has had a huge role in getting us entangled in a war with Iran.
Yeah, interesting. And just to kind of jump back to, you're kind of talking about private equity and home prices, and out here in Leelanau County, at average price, I think last month it's well over 700,000 for, on the market. Obviously, that's skewed here and there with, big purchases and that sort of thing. But it's slim pickings on the market out here, and I'm sure you're well aware of that. I guess could you go in further into your housing platform and focuses on banning private equity, but in Leelanau, there's obviously private equity as well, but there's also a lot of locals buying Airbnbs or just small local groups buy Airbnbs and renting them off on the market, and just a lot of zoning regulations and stuff like that that kind of hampers, I guess, those opportunities. I guess what federal level levers would you pull, or could you speak more about that?
I think that we could have reasonable restrictions on short-term rentals, Airbnbs, Verbos, that sort of thing, especially when they get to be such an outsized component within our housing market. I think we're seeing it a lot, especially in the Northwest Lower Peninsula, where we have a lot of beautiful Great Lakes frontage. We have a lot of beautiful inland lakes, and so much of those properties are being captured that would have otherwise gone to young families trying to get a start because they're smaller, they're fixer uppers or whatever. Instead, they're flipped into these short-term rentals, and that's driving up the housing costs. The banning of private equity has an outsized effect in various different, especially urban centers. But I think that the universal solution, the one that is kind of that fits all communities, is I believe that we should have a return to public housing. We passed the Faircloth Amendment in 1999, and what that did was it functionally prohibited the federal government from building public housing. And most people don't know that. They don't realize that we stopped building public housing almost 30 years ago and instead have relied on programs like low-income housing tax credits, which are just another way that the federal government uses taxpayer dollars funneled through a private developer or private corporation, adding all those layers of profit and complexity. and then hoping that we're going to get scale and affordability out the back end of it. And we've just never gotten, compared to public housing, low income housing tax credit programs have never provided us the scale. They're not deeply affordable to the extent that public housing has been, and it's not permanent. Low income housing tax credit program usually has a defined affordability criteria that is stated as 30 years, but after 15 years in many cases, there's a penalty period where a developer can actually remove those units from affordability as long as they pay a penalty. But at a time when our housing costs are out of control, it's actually very attractive for many to exit affordability and make those market rate or luxury units. And those were developed with American taxpayer dollars. But it's a crisis on top of a crisis because within the next 10 years, about a third of our low income housing tax credit created affordable units are going to exit affordability. And we're actually going to start going negative, even if we're spending the same amount of money. So we have a crisis right now. We have a building crisis that is really just barreling down the tracks on us. And I just see nobody talking.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And I just find it kind of interesting too. It's especially out here in Leelanau, we're the only county in the state of Michigan without a Dollar General or McDonald's, and something that people around here are really proudful of. I'm pretty prideful of it, personally, just because we like to shop very local. That's kind of the instinct of this district in general too. But as someone running on platform, to providing for people's basics needs, how do you kind of square that with communities like this where it's a fight to get a Dollar General in there. It's a fight to, do some things like that. I guess not that that's necessarily, what you're talking about, but an example, I guess.
I think that we need to be able to empower small business. I think that it's great that you don't have a Dollar General or a McDonald's. We have them all over the place here in the Upper Peninsula, especially the Dollar Generals. They will come in and they will outcompete your local grocer, and they'll put your local grocer out of business. And then what we'll have a food desert, where there's a lack of quality produce or quality meats and those sorts of things, proteins, and that becomes a problem. So I'm glad that you've been able to keep them out. In terms of say general, meeting people's needs, I believe that we can meet people's needs in a number of ways. When I say that healthcare is a human right and housing are a human right, I think that those should be treated as infrastructural components of our society, that they shouldn't be negotiable. They shouldn't be something that should be subject to the profitability of a private company to determine that you get those things. But I also believe that our workers should be earning a living wage for where they live. I believe that by moving more and more of our productive capabilities into wages as opposed to into the profitability of a private corporation or stock buybacks for a big company, that's going to infuse more of those dollars into our local communities. And while Leelanau County has been great at being able to keep those out, a lot of places in the Upper Peninsula have become communities that are almost built and revolve around a Walmart or a Dollar General or their fast food chains. And so those companies that tend to pay starvation wages, that tend to have a disproportionate amount of their workforce rely on public assistance programs like SNAP or Section 8 housing vouchers or what have you. Those employers should be paying a living wage to those people because that'll have two effects. One, it'll give them more the ability to actually live their lives to the fullest capability. It will remove them from government assistance programs so that we'll save money and we won't have the kind of double subsidization that we have for companies like Walmart, where we're not only giving them a tax break for their business operations, but then subsidizing their workforce in the areas where they refuse to adequately compensate them. But also, we're going to see all of that potential unlocked within our own communities, and that allows communities like Leelanau to not have so much reliant on these big box stores.
Yeah, and food deserts out here, so it's a problem across the whole district, and it's just interesting. Interesting how we've been able to keep them out, and I mean, seeing how just like in my hometown, I'm from downstate. The groceries, every local grocery store there is, it's now Dollar General. Plain and simple, right? But I just find that interesting, and then I guess just moving on here, just to farmers and cherry farmers here out here in northern Michigan. What's with the climate volatility, like last year, we had I think, roughly like 100 million pounds expected cut down to 30. What's your plan, or if anything, at the Congress level that you would like to do to protect fruit farmers who can't, survive a bad year?
That's the real difficulty about our farming practices across the country is that we have, and this isn't necessarily about the cherry farmers there in Leland County, but our farmers in general are put in a position of precarity. And in many cases, they are forced to farm land that is becoming increasingly unproductive. And they're being forced to year after year have the volatility within their weather conditions because of climate change. And between the soil erosion and the degradation of the soils and having a bad year in terms of weather, those farmers are constantly on the front lines of not only our food supply, but having to deal with that volatility in terms of your personal finances is crushing to many of them. And I know a lot of farmers will find themselves in this constant debt cycle or a bailout cycle, and they want to be as productive as possible. I believe that we need to really reevaluate our farming practices in America by allowing ourselves to replenish our soils. And rather than paying a lot of farmers, and again, this is not about the cherry farmers in your area, but farming writ large, if we could empower more and more people, more and more farmers, small farmers, not target programs to small farmers, not to these large conglomerations of corporate farm operations. If we could target that so that we can have them doing soil resting and replenish rehabilitation, if we could spend the same amount of money installing good farming practices to make sure that we have long-term stability, um, instead of just having paying farmers to plant seeds that they know are never going to come to fruition, or going through this constant cycle of failure just because there's no getting off of that carousel. I believe that we have a tremendous amount of power in terms of engineering our society, and I'd like to see more of our resources spent to to subsidize better farming practices as opposed to bailing out maybe some that are failing.
Yeah, interesting. And it'll be I was just doing some things on strawberries here. Strawberries are down. Not too sure why. At least what I came across, pretty down across the state. But always interesting to see how our cherry farmers and all the farmers across the district are doing, because there's I get caught up in Leland a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of different farmers for sure. So thanks for answering that question. And then I guess just moving on here to the question of maybe my generation, my time, AI and data centers. I mean, what's your views on that currently, and kind of the direction where we're going as a nation, and if there's at the congressional level that you would like to see done.
So what I see in data centers, I see kind of rapacious capitalism run amok. We're constantly told that we need to mortgage our future for this next boom, and AI is the new one, and it comes with massive physical infrastructure in data centers. And the way we're seeing those data centers being deployed, regardless of what the community feels about it, is alarming to me. The rate at which we're building these data centers when we have zero, regulation on AI, both from an intellectual property perspective, copyright perspective, our personal likeness protections, anything like that. Mass surveillance is now becoming the main use case of AI and the physical infrastructure, the data centers. The use of AI in weapon systems should alarm us all. But perhaps more than anything, more than the effects on our environment, more than the effects on our our data privacy, I don't want to see another exponential growth in the productivity of the American working class without us ultimately reaping the benefits. We see that time and time again. We've all seen the graph that shows the increased productivity per capita in the American working class measured against the stagnating wages. And one is climbing all the time, and the other one is flat. And the growing distance between those two lines, our productivity and our compensation, that's how I define the billionaire class. That is your siphoned productivity for fewer and fewer people's benefit. I want to make sure that we have a moratorium on data center construction, that we shouldn't be building data centers at the rate that we're building them without any regulation. The floodgates are open, so the first step should be to close those floodgates. And then I want to make sure that we're regulating AI in all the matters of which I described, in terms of protecting our data privacy, putting safeguards in place against mass surveillance and weapons applications. But I also want to guarantee that the American working class isn't the one that is ultimately going to be left behind. I want to make sure that if we are going to be more productive, that we are working, that more of us are working less and being compensated more, rather than the way that it works right now, where every single time we have a technological innovation like data centers and AI, we see that the capitalist class wants less of us working harder for less compensation. And I want to make sure that we preserve that dynamic. And that would include things like a 32-hour work week. That would include things like these social safety nets that I'm proposing as a broader part of my platform, to make sure that first and foremost we are taken care of.
And just to kind of go on that surveillance kind of side of things, just a month ago, in the bipartisan bill, Bergman, our congressman, and then, I passed the FISA Act for surveillance powers, excuse me, powers under FISA without a warrant requirement on American citizens. Would you support something like that or no?
Hell no. No, and I honestly I use that as a perfect example of also what's kind of broken in Democratic Party politics as well. Is you ask the average citizen whether they're a Republican or Democrat voter, they don't want their government to be able to surveil them with these warrantless, these security theater, these security apparatus that we have over the top of us. Talk to anybody about the Patriot Act or um, any of the other mass surveillance bills and broad latitudes that are granted to the federal government. They don't like it. So why do we have bipartisan support of something like the FISA extensions? And so I want to make sure that we're all very clear that the reason why that happens, why we see warrantless surveillance of American citizens passing through our Congress, despite the fact that nobody on the ground wants it, is because of money in our politics and the way that so many of those politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, are captured by that.
Interesting. And yeah, it's interesting. On that topic as well. And then I guess just moving along, I guess with Congress, if you would like to comment on this, should members of Congress face stricter ethics rules, bans on trading or betting on markets and that sort of thing? I guess what's your position on that, sir?
Yeah, I think that again is another one of those like no-brainer things. We should not have members of Congress effectively insider trading on information, and especially now that we have these so-called prediction markets, where you can now it's not you're betting on a stock that you happen to preside over some subcommittee that is dictating, American policy around those industries, but now you can actually see as these anonymous figures with probably within our government or affiliated with our government have privileged information that they're deploying in these prediction markets. I think all of that stuff needs to be strictly restricted, and that includes banning of stock trading, and holding of individual stocks or cryptocurrencies. I've pledged never to hold any of that while I'm in Congress. I don't think that you can govern to govern the way that your constituents expect you to if you have a side hustle, which is trying to work the stock market through your actions in Congress.
And then one interesting thing about there was just something going on. I know one of the Republican congressmen signed off. I don't know if anybody else has signed off kind of on this pledge. Would you support a term limits pledge? And I guess, do you support a term limits pledge?
The problem I have with a pledge is that it's going to affect the people who actually want to do good for people, and everybody else gets to keep their job, in perpetuity. I believe that we do need term limits in Congress. I believe that we need to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment. I think we should be moving towards ranked choice voting at every state level conceivable until we can get at a federal level. I think we should be, working to remove the filibuster. I think we should be making this process increasingly more democratic and make it so that more of us can participate in our democracy. But I think we do that by actually having constitutional limitations and statutory limitations, by passing laws to govern everybody rather than just waiting on the best people to kind of drop out because they've reached their term limits. I believe that we should be limiting people to basically 12 years in Congress, one way or the other. They should be able to have either two 6-year terms in the Senate, or they should be able to have 6 2-year terms in the House. And that should be it. You cannot have these career politicians that are in there for 30 some odd years and they're just consolidating wealth and power and entrenching themselves within our democracy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And how are you, Kyle? 40, right? 40,
41.
41, 41. Okay. And Leelanau is one of the, and I guess I'll just enter you with a couple more questions here. First, I guess, America 250, 4th of July. What do you and your family do to bring in the holiday here?
Well, this year is going to be a little bit different because when you're campaigning now, there's certain expectations. So I think that we're going to be. I want to say we're going to be in the Fourth of July parade up in Marquette, in the Upper Peninsula, and then there's a handful of other communities that will stagger their Fourth of July. So it's going to be more hectic this year than it usually is. Usually, what it looks like is we'll go out to the parade with our kids and some friends of ours, and then we'll have barbecue and beers afterwards. But this year is probably going to be a little bit more hellacious.
Yeah, heck yeah. And I know it's 250 in our nation's history. I guess does that what does that mean to you, especially as you run for Congress here?
I think that it reminds us that this thing was never perfect, that it's something we continually have to work at. And year after year, I think that we can get closer, we can get further from what the founders had expected in terms of the general liberty and prosperity of the people here in America. And I think that we have lost sight of that outcomes. We've lost sight of those outcomes because we keep getting entrenched in this two-party rat race, this team sports BS. And I hope people realize that first and foremost, you are neighbors in the American working class. That it doesn't matter if your collar is white or blue. If you sell some of your finite time on this earth for $1, at any point you stop, the system abuses you, jails you, or forgets you, then congratulations, you're in the American working class and you're the 90% in this country. And we need to start recognizing class solidarity with one another so that we can start pulling the cart in the same direction. So we can start to meaningfully affect the outcomes of our lives. So the next 250 years of this country are more prosperous, more just, more equitable than the previous 250 years.
And I guess just for Leland Oswald, one of the best voter bases per capita. We get out to vote over here. Why should they give you your vote? Give you their vote. Sorry.
Sure. I think that I'm a son of the I'm a son of the district. I know what it's like to be subject to the structural, the economic violence of our system. I'm somebody who has student loan debt. I'm somebody who has had medical debt because I had the audacity to have children in this country. I know what it's like to watch so many communities within our district to wither and die because they are not getting adequate wages, because their hospital systems and their schools are not enough to be able to entice families back and to be able to feed new employees to their local industry. I know what it's like to watch as your neighbors' lives get worse and not better. And I want first and foremost for that to be reversed. I more than anything, more than any of this partisan BS. I want to make sure that my neighbors' lives are taken care of. I don't believe in kind of triangulating to what is vaguely popular or considered to be vaguely popular based on the last election or the last poll result or what the punditry on CNN or MSNBC says is allowable and along the way accept a lot of injustice and inequity. I believe that our job as politicians, loath as I am to call myself one, is to set our North Star at justice and equity and improving lives of your neighbors and then work to make that popular with your neighbors. And so that's really what I'm what this campaign's all about is finding what is just and making it popular and empowering people to realize the potential of their lives.
Interesting. And we just appreciate you stepping in for a few minutes. We hope to do another one as we get up to the big day there, the big dance on the 4th of August. And Kyle Bloomquist, we just appreciate a few minutes of your time. We wish you the best of luck out there and just thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed this.
Okay, thanks. And then just clap and but yeah, that's the end there. But just thanks for taking your time. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. So what I'm gonna do with this, because I almost got everybody. I got
Okay.
like one or two left, and I'm gonna start putting them out. I'm debating on if we should put them all out together, or if I should do like one Republican, one Dem, and figure out that way. And but it should be
Sure.
coming out here in the next several days. So and just in
Okay.
online and in print form as well as an article. So we'll get that, and we just wish you the best of luck. So thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yep. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.